How are we going, folks? Today I've got for you Tamatha Paul. Now, Tamatha Paul is the Green Party MP for Wellington Central, who has a particular view on our criminal justice system, which I think the average New Zealander probably doesn't subscribe to.
I call Tamatha Paul. Well, this is the sad state of this House, that you've got a significant bill coming through and you've got the government parties who have led this legislation stand up and give 2-minute pathetic speeches. That side of the House is so out of touch with the reality of New Zealand. They get up and they give their stump speeches, give their key lines, and then they sit back down because they don't have anything valuable to contribute to this discussion.
And you've been talking for 27 seconds and have said nothing of value. Funny how that works.
That is a disservice to victim. That the summary of your thoughts and ideas on justice is to spit out some lines that some communications advisor wrote for you. Pathetic.
But I'd like to point out it's been 38 seconds, you've said nothing of value, you've just attacked the other side because they have opinions you disagree with. Okay, well done.
This sentencing reform bill is going to result in more people being funneled into our prisons, and it does not make our communities any safer. And I don't know what la-la land you might be living in on that side of the House, but if you'd actually step foot in a prison, there's no rehabilitation going on in there.
Lie number one. The idea that there is no rehabilitation going on in New Zealand prisons is one of the biggest lies related to our justice system that is being pushed by the Green Party and by the left in general. There are such a variety of rehabilitation opportunities in our system, but it requires a few things to happen. One, typically most of these things are only available to those who are sentenced, and two, it requires buy-in and for it to be part of your sentencing plan. So if it's not part of your sentencing plan, it means that it's not really needed for you to be considered as prepared for release. And part of the problem with that is often the time that you're inside. So if you're only going to be inside for, let's say, 12 months following sentencing, there is actually not that much available for you. A solution to this would be, of course, increasing the length of time you're in prison. But it's worth noting that most people who are sentenced to a term of imprisonment, they're there for a reasonable length of time. And so the excuse that they don't have the opportunity to have any form of rehabilitation is simply not there. And the lack of access to it is more in relation to their own behavior and their own attitudes and personal desire to engage with those programs than it is the availability of them. Prisons have a variety of options available to you. There are whole pathways. Someone who does, let's say 3 or 4 years before they get parole has ample opportunity to rehabilitate, dramatically turn their lives around. I'm just going to quickly run you through a potential pathway for them. Let's say they are a second or third time offender. They've come in for aggravated robbery. They've got drug and alcohol abuse issues. They've now been sentenced to, let's say, 6 or 7 years. They've got the opportunity for parole after 2 or 3. They will go in. They will have the option of starting a drug and alcohol course to improve that. There'll be other types of courses which may be focused on behavior. Depending on the prison, you might have access to a Māori cultural related course. Often, I know in Hawke's Bay there is a unit that is a Māori focus unit. So a lot of the day-to-day ways in which their unit functions is rooted and based in Māori culture. I know 2 of the people responsible for the Hokairangi Māori Pathway program there, which before you say anything, it's actually quite good. I like it. There is some real merit to it, and of course non-Māori can participate in it as well. But having seen how the average unit works versus that unit, there is definitely some merit to having that, given how many Māori are in prison. So, for those of you who don't like that sort of Māori focused stuff, there is a place for it in our prisons for sure, so long as it doesn't involve special treatment of people, and it most certainly does not. But yeah, I happen to have spent a lot of time with 2 of the individuals responsible for putting that together. Stuff like that is really, really good, really, really crucial. It has helped quite a few men, young and old, kind of get put on a better pathway and continue through the system. Whether you're doing that, whether you're doing drug and alcohol, other sorts of behavioral related programs, one-on-one counseling, be that with psych, be that with someone who's a little bit less intensive, but just focusing on unpacking a few of the things that you've dealt with. You'll also have case managers and other people work with you to reconnect with family, to begin the process of looking at your kind of financial and living situation if you were to be released. On top of that, you have, depending, behavior contingent, all of this is on, but looking at a potential for you to reintegrate into society instead of it just being dumped on you when you get released. So people who are reasonably well behaved can get their security classification lowered. They could stay in the unit they're in, or they could progress to a internal self-care unit, which is quite a bit different. You're basically in a bit of a flat, so there's 4 of you in there. It's all within the prison wire. Mixed in with all of that is you've got employment opportunities. So you could be working in rubbish, laundry, gardening. I know in Hawke's Bay they've got orchards. They've got a range of different areas that you can work in. And this instills into you some routine, some responsibility. All of this stuff is really, really crucial and important for those that really put in the most work, and often they're there for quite a while, so they've got all of their impulses out of the way, and they realize they just want their time to be easy. But that kind of highlights it's all in the mindset type of vibe, and a lot of the obstacle to rehabilitation is purely in the mind of the offender rather than what's actually available to them. But to get back on track, you can go through that pathway. You can have these job opportunities. You can then find yourself in a self-care environment. You can then find yourself in an external self-care environment where you're outside the wire. You're still on the property, but you're outside the main fence. You can go out and work in the community at approved locations. Typically, those will be in orchards, or I think sometimes they might have like a pickpacker type vibe. It really depends on what prison you're at. But I know you've got in Hawke's Bay, you've got orchard opportunities. I know one such individual who went and worked at a cafe temporarily. Then you've got Spring Hill, which is across the road from Hampton Downs racetrack. You have the opportunity to even go and work at Hampton Downs on weekends. A range of different opportunities there. And these are all pathways that you work towards, that when you get to that reintegration phase, you've done all the rehabilitation and you're not being just dropped back into society and it's all overwhelming. There is such potential for our criminal justice system. It's just not being optimized. And I think we're blaming the criminal justice system too much. Certainly at least the actual prisons themselves. And we're not blaming the judiciary, the way that they are making decisions around sentencing enough, and we aren't blaming, quite frankly, the offenders enough, because those are the two things that are the biggest obstacles: the judiciary and the offenders, and also some of the bureaucrats and higher ups within the system, because sometimes they might make a decision with respect to prison transfers which conflict with the planned rehabilitation pathway that happens. So yeah, there is a lot there. What Tamatha said is just blatantly false. But I've waffled too long. Let's continue.
I've been to 10 prisons in the last year. There's no rehabilitation going on at all in there. What do you think people are doing in there?
Rehabilitating if they choose to. If not, they are doing a range of things, Tamatha. You would know if you actually spent more than 5 minutes there.
Making better connections. That's why it's called the Ministry of Connections, not Corrections, because that's not happening in there.
That is a joke in there, but also that's a choice. They're not making those connections because that's the only thing that they can do. They're choosing to prioritize that over everything else that they're being provided as an alternative.
Rehabilitation is virtually non-existent. You're sending people in there for a longer time to make more friends, to be better criminals. Well done. You've achieved something today.
Please don't bring the speaker into the debate.
Okay.
And this is the contempt that some of these younger members of parliament have. Like, just blatant disrespect to the Speaker of the House. Blatant disrespect. And, she's completely in the wrong there. And so she should actually humble herself, especially when everything that she's just said for the last minute has been an out-and-out lie.
We know for a fact that only 7 to 15% of rehabilitation programs in prisons are actually successful. And prisons don't even have the time to consider what kind of a service they're offering to people in those prisons, because they are so busy trying to accommodate a growing prison population.
What would note is she just spent a minute saying how there is no rehabilitation going on in prisons at all, and then she then immediately said that the rehabilitation in prisons only had like a 15 to 18% success rate. The success rate isn't necessarily the fault of the rehabilitation. It certainly doesn't mean that there is no rehabilitation because you're acknowledging that there is by the fact that there is data proving it. Um, what it does suggest is that there isn't a lot of buy-in by the people within the prison to get the most out of it, and oftentimes there are a few different things that contribute to that, notably the buy-in from the inmate themselves. They have to want to change, otherwise they won't. Additionally, the length of time they're in there, the shorter period of time you're in, the less likely those rehabilitation opportunities are going to have the desired effect.
And I don't know why the other members are looking at me at disgust. That is the consequence of your actions.
No, it's
the
not.
government's actions. Yes, they are. Prison capacity is the summary of your justice approach and response. It's not to address the drivers of crime. It's not to address poverty or trauma or mental health issues or drug addiction, which are the reasons that people end up in prison. Your response is to make our prisons larger. You want to make Christchurch prison larger, Auckland prison larger, and continue to build prisons.
And the reason why they want to continue to build prisons is because our population keeps growing. And unfortunately, our population is growing disproportionately larger in the communities who commit a disproportionate amount of crime. So that is a problem. But yeah, ultimately, our prisons are getting larger. The Labour government, the most recent Labour government, dropped the prison population by 30%, and we had a around 26% increase in crime victimizations in that same time period. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about the need for our prison population to go up, because what's currently happening isn't going to cut it.
That is not going to solve anything. And I spoke to a corrections officer and he said, as the muster grows, the quality goes. That's what they're preparing for. And at the moment, they are dealing with double bunked cells. They are at capacity, and this bill will make those prisons even fuller.
Except you've just criticised them for building more prisons so that they don't have double bunked cells. But your solution is, rather than holding those who need to be held accountable, and ensuring that the people in the community are safe, notably the victims who you briefly mentioned at the start, you would sooner have us put these people back on the street, despite the fact that when we did that between 2017 and 2023, there was a 26% increase in victims of crime, and ultimately there were tens of thousands more New Zealanders victimised. Well done, Tamatha.
There are too many people in our prisons. This bill is particularly disgusting, though, because it attacks our young people. The people who are supposed to be our future. You're saying that their age should not be taken into account by judges when they're sentenced.
Actually, what it does say is that you do indeed get a discount when you're sentenced for being a youth, but if you come back again, you won't be given it. Because you've clearly had your opportunity. You've already had that discount once. You've had time to grow and make better decisions since the first time you got sentenced. Clearly it's not working, and clearly giving you this discount isn't going to make a bloody difference. So we're not going to give you this discount for youth when you've already had that opportunity. That's what it says. It doesn't remove a discount for youth or a consideration for youth at sentencing unless you're a recidivist offender who clearly doesn't really care about the community, about society, or learning from their behaviour.
There is a reason that those provisions are in place, and it's because people in their lives, when their brains are developing at a certain age, they make decisions differently. They do not weigh up the consequences. They are more susceptible to being peer pressured into doing things that they don't want to do. But it's easy for that side of the house to sit there and hand wring and talk about personal responsibility because they've had more options in their lives than all of the young people that are in prison.
And the average 15-year-old young offender who listens to this speech by Tamatha Paul, not that they would because they don't involve themselves with this stuff, but if they did, they would say, she fell for it. That's literally what their response would be. Should be, she listened to absolutely everything I told her and now she's saying it. Cracked it. That'll be their response. They laugh whenever politicians and officials do what they want. They actually get enjoyment, and it's a big game to them to manipulate people who are above them, people in places of authority. It's how they roll. The average day in a youth justice facility will see a good chunk of the people there looking at ways of exploiting the trust put in them to behave themselves, exploiting the positions of the staff there. They are very, very vindictive and manipulative people. They are very much aware of what they're doing. They are thinking through everything. They are thinking through the consequences. They just don't care.
How do I know? Because I talked to them. I went to the youth unit at Mount Eden Prison and asked them why they were in there. And it was because they had no options, because they are disabled, because they are poor, because they come from places not like the ones that this side of the house come from. Have some compassion and some empathy for the people that you talk about and that you lock up. The human potential that this government wastes, absolutely wastes it.
Does she think she's the first politician to go to a prison and talk to offenders young and old? Because there are many instances where that's occurred. And I'll tell you right now, they 100% lie through their teeth. 100%. Some of them won't, but many will lie through their teeth. Like, what she's saying is so devoid of reality that it's 100% clear that she's been lied to. Because you have to remember, her whole position is predicated on what she's been told by inmates, mostly. How can she verify anything the inmates have said is true? She can't. That's the reality. She can't verify that any of it's true. She just has to take them at their word. There are people who have never looked and found enjoyment in manipulating, authority figures within the system, who will tell you that the norm is to lie to politicians when they come. Calvin Davis and Pene Henare came to the Hawke's Bay prison a few years ago. I can guarantee you some inmates there lied to them. Additionally, you have people conducting research into young offenders and other areas of the justice system who will come and interview people, and I can guarantee you people lied to them. This is because they use that as an opportunity to benefit themselves in the system in the long term, because many of them are in there knowing that this is going to be a lifestyle for them. They are going to come back once they're released, and they approach every single day inside like that. Tamatha Ball doesn't know this because she isn't one of them. She's never been around them long enough. And frankly, she's extremely naive.
This bill oversteps judicial discretion. There's a reason why judges stop sentencing people, because they know that prisons don't work. And then here comes this ideological government who has no care in the world for evidence, who continues to do the same thing over and over again, and it does not work. $800 million over 5 years is going into corrections. Meanwhile, our hospitals are degraded, our schools are collapsing, our public services are in absolute disarray. You spend $151,000 on locking one person up, $80,000 per person in the correction system. You spend $1,000 per person in the health budget. You spend $4,000 per person in the education budget. It's pathetic, and I know it's not where taxpayers want their money going. You guys, this side of the house needs to buck their ideas up when it comes to justice, because all it is failure after failure. It is ruining lives, it is wasting human potential, and it is not the answer.
And I notice all of your so-called answers revolve around letting very dangerous people out on the street to participate in restorative justice, which essentially is sitting around in a circle saying, "I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Is there anything I can do to help?" It's pathetic. That's actually part of the current system. It's typically best to do both rather than just one. I'm very much an advocate for rehabilitation and punitive approaches, because they're both needed. You can't have one without the other. One without the other doesn't work. And if you knew anything about the criminal mind, how these people think, you would know that absolutely everything you've just said, Tamatha, is completely ridiculous. Educate yourself and stop listening to 15-year-olds who are trying to manipulate you into making their life of crime easier.